Today we're going to talk about what has people act the way they do, especially when it doesn't make sense to you. This really is about giving you a doorway and access into empathy when it seems impossible. When you just can't make sense of people's actions. So this is useful in personal relationships, social relationships, in business, in really every domain of life that involves human interaction. And so the underlying principle of this is that human beings have a fundamentally contextual, or said another way, a meaning-laden relationship to life. What does that mean? It means that for human beings, really our only access to the world is through language, context, meaning, etc. This is even true of the way our brains process sensory input. Even sensory input can only be made sense of in the brain through connecting it with experiences, connections, labels. I think one of my favorite examples of this comes from the work of Dr. David Eagleman, who has written 2 books that I know of anyway that are really written for the general population. Although he is a brilliant neuroscientist and goes deep into that domain, he's written some books that lay people can understand, like myself. And in one of those books, he talks about an Olympic skier who at the age of 8 went blind, learned how to ski as a blind person, became an Olympic medalist. And then in his 30s, after having several children, there was a surgery available to him to cure his blindness. So when he was in the hospital recovering from surgery and getting his eyes unwrapped, so to speak, he was about to see his children for the very first time. And when he saw them, he had no idea what he was looking at. He couldn't make any sense of the visual input coming in to his brain. So there were his 2 children right in front of him, but he didn't see children. He didn't see his children. He didn't know what he was seeing because his brain could not process the information because it had no contextual framework in which to parse all the photons hitting his retina. So this is an example of what I mean. Our relationship to life as a human being is fundamentally linguistic. Now, what does this have to do with understanding people's behavior? Well, people can only act in ways that make sense, that are consistent with their view and experience of life. Not with the way the world or life is, but with their view and experience, i.e. the meaning, the network of meaning through which they experience life. So when you are in a situation where people are acting in a way that just does not make sense to you, and in fact looks to you like it is detrimental or it is, stupid or whatever else, whatever other kind of reaction you may tend to have when someone acts in a way that you really don't like, before you react to the meaning you are ascribing to their behavior when it doesn't seem to make any sense, pause and consider this. If you can't make sense of their actions, consider what would their view and experience of the situation of life have to be for that kind of action to make sense to them. So not what makes it meaningful or makes sense to you, like they're a jerk or they're out to get you or whatever, but rather what view would they have to have of the situation or of life for that behavior to make total sense for them. See, no one walks around and says, well, I'm a jerk, so I'm going to do jerky things. That's not their view. Now, I'm not saying that's impossible, but generally speaking, that's not their view. That's our view, that they're a jerk or whatever. So pause, ask the question, what would their view and experience of this situation have to be that their behavior makes total sense from that view? I've heard Brené Brown talk about this. I also heard my wife Elizabeth talk about this, also as assuming positive intent or being generous in your interpretation. So assuming someone is acting in a way that makes sense to them, it's also their intention to do something productive, proactive, whatever. Even if they may be wrong in the way they're interpreting it, that is probably their intention, okay? So this pause and asking this question will allow you to assume positive intent and have a deeper understanding, more of a connection, more empathy with the person who you're interacting with in whatever situation you don't like their behavior. Why is this important? Because when we can connect through empathy and see the world through another's eyes and help them understand that we actually do get the logic, we get the sensical nature of what they're doing, then there's more room for a conversation about what would work for everyone, as opposed to a reaction, which often comes from a place of judgment, like you shouldn't do that, you're wrong, I'm right, etc. And I'm sure you've noticed this by now, that no matter how right you think you are, having conversations from that place almost never produces a productive conversation or a productive outcome. So I'm inviting you to practice this. When you can't make sense of someone's actions, see if you can ascertain, see if you can see the point of view, the experience underneath their actions from which it does make perfect sense, and then engage with them from there. See if you can connect with the bridge, the gap in sense between their behavior and the way you see the world. See if you can reconnect through empathy and move everyone forward. See if you can be the tide that raises all the ships. Any human being can do this. You can do this. And every time you do this, connection on the planet grows, love grows, empathy grows, workability grows, and you can be the source of that. So thank you for watching. Have a great day.